Hello everyone, welcome to Sonata Form Part 2. First, let's review what we talked about in our last class. Sonata form is comprised of three large sections called the exposition, development, and recapitulation. We looked at the exposition in Beethoven's Sonata in G major, Opus 49, number 2. Beethoven's exposition exposed two themes: an energetic first theme in G major, the home key, and a gentler, more lyrical theme in D major, the dominant. Remember that a theme is a complete musical thought that serves as the main idea of a piece or movement. Between these two themes is a transition that modulates from G major to D major via a secondary dominant as a pivot chord. After the second theme is presented, a closing theme is used to close off the exposition, emphasizing the new key area of D major by repeatedly cadencing in the new key. Why are there so many cadences, you may ask? It's interesting that while the average listener may not have noticed the change to a new tonal area, a move away from the main key takes time and great emphasis. It's as if the composer is trying to convince you that G is no longer the main key and therefore has to spend time in D major. Compare the length of time in G major as opposed to D major in this exposition on your grid. In addition to the themes, composers often use motives, short musical fragments, to provide cohesion in a movement or work. In Beethoven's example, the triplet figure is a motive we see several times in the exposition. Now take a moment to listen to the exposition again so that we remember our discussion from last week. Finally, please note that in this recording, you'll hear the exposition repeated because that is general practice in classical sonata forms. The repeat is notated in Beethoven's score. So now we can move into the development. Since this is one of Beethoven's shortest piano sonatas, the development doesn't take very long, but that doesn't mean we can't explore his harmonic and melodic technique. Now, what is Beethoven going to develop? He can develop anything he presented in the exposition. Will it be theme 1 or theme 2? Or a combination? Or maybe material from the closing theme? In order to craft a good development, you have to have robust thematic material in the exposition. So looking at the score, we see theme 1 up here again. But this time, there's a dramatic shift to minor, specifically D minor. How is D minor related to the ending of the exposition in D major? That's right, it's mode mixture. Beethoven knew what he was doing. He doesn't just jump into a random key. After two measures in D minor, he then moves sequentially and tonicizes A minor. Beethoven quickly then moves into E minor, followed by a pedal point on B. This B pedal tonicizes B major. So now, if we look back at our grid, we can fill in some of these boxes for the development section. The first theme continues throughout this part, and Beethoven tonicizes A minor, E minor, and B major. At measure 63, he then reverses the tonicizations, goes from B back to E minor, back to A minor, and then finally to D major in measure 66. At this point, the melodic material becomes more fragmented. Notice that Beethoven has reversed this, where he went from D to A to E and then B. He has done the exact opposite to bring us to the dominant of our home key, which is G major. The dominant is called the retransition. That happens in measure 66. It sometimes is a little bit longer, but the important thing about the retransition is it brings us back to the home key. Why is it called a retransition? Well, you may recall that in the exposition, the transition brought us to a new key of D major. The retransition brings us back to the home key of G major. Finally, we get to the last section of our sonata form, the recapitulation. The recapitulation brings back everything in the exposition, but is never exactly the same. In fact, the tonal areas will be different. So here we see that Beethoven starts the recapitulation at measure 67, where the first theme appears in the home key of G major. The transition immediately follows this first theme, but does not actually change key. Beethoven stays in the home key of G major because this is the ending of our movement. The brilliance of sonata form is that the tonal area that was exposed in the exposition in the dominant has now been resolved to the tonic in the recapitulation. As expected, we see the second theme. It appears in our home key. This is the brilliance of sonata form. What was exposed in the exposition as a key change now is resolved at the end of the piece with the same thematic material in the home key. So even though a typical audience member may not realize that that hanging D major was left unfinished in the exposition, you have a resolution at the end of this form. Beethoven also includes closing material here that we saw in the exposition, also in the home key of G major. Let's now finish off our grid that we started. We have the first theme that comes back in measure 67 in the home key of G major. The transition now runs from measure 75 until measure 87. That is not unstable, but sort of mimics the same transition as the exposition. The second theme, also in G major, extends until measure 103. The closing theme runs from measure 103 to the end. The stability of this entire recapitulation emphasizes the home key. There is no coda in this sonata, but it is an optional part of the form.